Shalom and welcome to this week's Living Torah. Quite a week. I know what it's like to be a bug trapped in the center of a yo-yo, as we've been going up and down all over the place, and the news is coming out. It's just on a moment-by-moment thing. Of course, we all sat, I think, in awe of what happened from the United States to Iran this past week. It was remarkable. I don't know what all the news reports are going to come out. There's things that will never be said, but it appears on this right now that this was a great victory for the United States. And one of the reasons for that victory is because of the softening of the targets by Israel. Now, Israel is continually caught up in this. Yesterday it was reported that Iran and Israel had come to a place of a ceasefire, and right before the ceasefire, they Iran sent a ballistic missile into Israel and killed 4 in Beersheba, and that, of course, prompted a response. And now the next thing I hear is President Trump, give him the honor due to his title. President Trump is now scolding both Israel and Iran. And this is, who knows where it's going to go even by the time this video is released on Thursday. But I do want to make a very brief statement regarding President Trump, and something that I have been saying. I hope that this has been resonating with people. But I stand when President Trump makes a decision that I believe is a scriptural decision, something that's based upon the word, I'm going to stand with him. When he says something that is not, like his statement of Israel and Iran are going to have a peace now that is going to last forever. Well, that didn't last very long. I'm not going to. And there's people out there that just can't deal with that. Either they're in their feeling President Trump is right all the time, or he's right none of the time. And I play golf with guys on both sides. Literally, that it wouldn't matter if President Trump did find world peace tomorrow and a way to make everybody a multimillionaire, they would have something to complain about. It's just their personality and their total bias. But I try to look at the situation, and when I see that he is doing something that lines up with Scripture, okay, let's go. If it doesn't, I'm not going to throw my support at that. And this is the statement I've made recently is President Trump is a businessman. He is not a biblical man. Now, some would maybe disagree with that, but from what I've been able to gather of those that are around him, his spiritual advisors, most of them are still very much Catholic, Christian, replacement theology, goes right on down the list. So how you can take replacement theology and still say the Jews are God's chosen people is beyond my comprehension. But these are the advisors that are around him today for the most part. He is not opening the Scripture and looking at the Torah. I look at what is going on in the Middle East, and I see the prophecies that are given over Isaac and Ishmael. I see the prophecies given over Jacob and Esau. I look to a verse that is always kind of somewhere in the back of my mind, and that is in 1 Thessalonians, reading off my phone here. It says in 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 3, "For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they will not escape." So there's things going on here that we don't understand what it is. So that's why I don't get, just totally overwhelmingly excited on a moment by moment. I try to not have my life look like some kind of an emotional roller coaster that is dependent on the last news article. And I would challenge you in the same thing. Now, this week's Torah portion is Korah. And Korah, we've got I think a good place to start is going back a week to the 10 spies or the 12 spies that were sent out. It says Moshe was told, send on your behalf. So was this a chink in the armor of Moshe? Was this a leadership failure on his part? And did that, I'm not trying to in any way judge Moshe on this, but just ask some questions. Did that maybe a bit of a leadership failure lead to this with Korah? And Korah was there at all moment, every moment of time, just saying, hey, if I can get an inroad here, it's like the proverbial camel that got its nose under the tent, and the next thing is laying in bed with you, which is really stinky and probably not very comfortable. So Korah comes on the scene, and it says that he rebelled in verse 2, rebelled against Moshe. Siding with them were 250 men of Israel, leaders of the community, key members of the council, men of reputation. The word rebelled here is the word kum, and is the same word that's used going back to the Torah, or going back to the beginning, that he said, I will establish my covenant with Noah. I will establish my covenant with Abram at the time, with Moshe. The word is kum. So this word of he rebelled, what was he doing? Was he rebelling against Moshe, or was he rebelling against the covenant? Well, I'd say the answer is, for the most part, yes, but I would give it more of an 80-20, that it was 80% covenant that he was rebelling against. Moshe is just the one standing in his way. Now, it says that 250 men of renown, or men of reputation, had sided with Moshe. Who are these people? We're not told exactly, but here's the lesson that we need to bring forth from that. These are men that were trying to make a name for themselves. They were men of reputation, which means they had tried to make themselves great in the eyes of the people instead of making Yah great in the eyes of the people. Now, this is a very interesting principle, something I tried to teach some on this what was it, a week and a half ago now, at camp, of who do we allow in our lives? And I went into this in more detail. I actually did the same message, another variation of it, at Life Assembly this past Shabbat, and that will be available on our website in about a week. Okay, by the time I record next week, it'll be on there. And this is a message called Like a Tree, actually a title I've used before, but a different message in most ways. And it goes into how do we make decisions in our life that will be godly decisions, biblical decisions, scriptural decisions to lead us forward. And one of the ideas that I didn't actually go into this in that message, but I think is a good addition to it, and that is that you and I, we don't really have control over who we meet on a daily basis. Okay, you're going to go about your typical day. You may go to the same restaurant every day for lunch. You may go to the same place to get gas, whatever. But you really don't have any control over who's pumping gas across the island from you. You may strike up a conversation. Okay, people could call this coincidence. People could call it happenstance. People could call it all kinds of things. some people would call it, well, godly. Some would call it, some call it divine, some demonic. I don't know. It just kind of depends on the day and who it is. But the truth is that we don't have control over the person that we meet, but we do have control over where we allow them to come into our lives. Yeshua had different circles of people. The multitudes, kind of to break it down into it actually breaks down into numerous circles more than this, but he had the multitudes, he had the 12, he had the 3, and he had 1, Yochanan. And every level of closeness was another level of intimacy, which was another level of trust, another level of relationship. All kinds of things happen when you let somebody from one circle into another circle closer to you. We do have control over that. And one of the principles that I try to go by is this. I do not allow people into the inner circles of my life that are trying to make a name for themselves. I've actually had to, at times, make a decision of where I would go in life. Sometimes those decisions cost financially. Sometimes those decisions cost in a status. But that's okay, because I don't want to allow people into the inner circles of my life that are going to influence me, and those people are trying to make a name for themselves. Those that I allow into the inner circles, I want to make sure they are trying to make a reputation for Yah's name, not for their name. Now, Korah and these men of reputation come to Moshe, and they basically say, why is it? Why is it that we need to follow this Torah? I mean, everybody in the congregation is holy. And is this kind of off of the last chapter? Are there still memories here of the last chapter? And this would be like saying the man that was found in the desert gathering sticks on Shabbat. And Korah looks at Moshe and says, why did you stone that man? I mean, I know what that writings that you have say, but you didn't know his heart. You didn't know his intent. You didn't know what he was trying to do. Just because you have this book that tells you that this is what is right and this is what is wrong, that doesn't mean that all of us have to follow that, Moshe. Why are you setting yourself up? And why are you setting up this word that you got from on the top of the mountain? Why are you setting that up as the standard for all of us? Well, Moshe was, as I said, scripturally minded. Moshe comes back to him with a lot of grace and mercy, which I mean, putting myself in here, I probably would not have been that graceful toward Korah. But he says to him, this is verses 8 and 9, you've been given a place of preeminence. You've been given a place in your job description. You're a Levite. And you have special duties in the tabernacle. Korah, why are you not grateful for that? I mean, the Almighty didn't call you to be chopping wood or gathering water. I was just working with a person that I got to know him much better than I have before. This was at camp. He publicly told the testimony of he's a very accomplished worship leader, very talented, very anointed. Love working with him. No competition. We just have a great time together, at least I think so. And he said he was called a few years ago and said, we would like you to be the in charge of the worship team. He's like, okay, great. And the next statement was, so we're putting you in charge of getting a worship leader and putting together a worship team. He's like, huh. Didn't say anything and thought to himself, but I am a worship leader. They're not asking me to be the worship leader. They're asking me to be in charge of finding a worship leader. He said it didn't take him long to figure out this was a test. The Almighty was putting him to a test. And so he went out and found a worship leader and worship team. And the next thing you know, he's in the restroom cleaning the toilets. Well, that's not where I should be. I should be over there on the platform and I should be doing, that's not what he did. He said, I cleaned the toilets. I did what I needed to do. Because see, promotion comes from the Almighty. But are we grateful for the place He has put us? People I've seen through the years, people don't see their importance in the kingdom. You know, if you're called to pray, don't say, well, I just pray. No. If you're called to clean the restrooms, clean them to the glory of God. Whatever you are called to do, and maybe there is a promotion, but where does the promotion come from? The promotion comes from Him. And if we're not willing to do what we would call the menial tasks, you want to shut down. It's like there was issues at camp with the restrooms. That becomes an issue. That becomes a major issue that literally brings everything to a, we have to stop and deal with this. And so if we understand that no matter what we're called to do in the kingdom, that's what we're called to do. And we need to do it to the best of our ability, no matter what it is. And if in the end there is no promotion, and you just kind of go through your whole life being the best restroom cleaner at Sukkot that ever lived, rejoice and be glad in that. Well done. Well done, my good and faithful servant. You did what you were called to do, period. We should not be, we should always be striving to do what we, that word I spoke on weeks ago of Hanani. Here I am. If you got something else for me to do, I'm right here. And maybe you're going to be promoted from cleaning the toilets to cleaning dishes. But again, this is what got Korah in trouble, is he was not grateful for the job that he was called to do. And because of that, he found 250 others around him and got them involved in his little scheme. Now, Moshe gives him this opportunity to repent. He doesn't. Moshe calls then for a meeting. He doesn't want to come, which, I've found out through the years that a person that is not willing to meet with you, in the end, usually knows that they are wrong. A person that's not repentant will not meet with you because it takes humility. And Korah could have looked at Moshe and said, you're right. Yah called you to that, and Moshe, you're probably not going to be able to do your job as well if I don't do my job. So, sorry this ever happened. Let me go talk to this 250 and get them back on the right track. And the story would have been totally different. We wouldn't have this Torah portion. But Didn't happen that way. And Korah sends word to Moshe. It says in verse 13, "Is it such a mere trifle, bringing us up from a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the desert, that now you arrogate to yourself the role of dictator over us? You haven't at all brought us to a land flowing with milk and honey, and you haven't put us in possession of fields and vineyards." You know, there's truth in that. There's a lot of truth, and there's some lies, because Egypt was not a land flowing with milk and honey. But the truth is, Moshe had not brought them into a land flowing with milk and honey. And why? Because everyone sided with the 10 spies instead of the 2. That's not Moshe's fault. That's not Yah's fault. That's their fault. So Moshe could have sent a message back and said, yeah, the reason we're not there is because of you. Goes on, they haven't been brought into the place of fields and vineyards. Why? Same thing. It's because of the people. It's not because of Yah. It's not because of Moshe. Not because of Aaron. It's their fault. They did not do what the Torah had told them. Do not follow the wrong crowd when they're going in the wrong direction. Now, what is the sin of Korah? It is, simply put this way, in my estimation, legitimizing, celebrating, and longing to go backwards. I talked a couple weeks ago about going forward. There's no provision in His Word that I have seen for going backwards. It's only going forward. Korah was the ringleader here of taking a group of people back to bondage. It is unfortunate, but in the Hebrew roots, Messianic world, whatever we want to call it today, I see, this may sound a bit judgmental, but I'm going to say it anyway. I see leaders that are trying to take people backwards instead of forwards. The system that we left, you may be told that it was flowing with milk and honey. The milk was sour. The honey was going to give you some bee stings. And for this personality of Korah, I'm trying to choose my words very carefully here. This spirit of Korah, I guess we could call it that wants to take people back. So we can be a witness to them. So we can minister to them. I've often thought, I don't think this guy really thought through this thing. Because there's now, as they watched, they came across the Reed Sea, and then it went back together, and they saw the Egyptians dead on the shore. So if they're wanting to go back to Egypt, who's going to split the sea again? I think that they just haven't thought through some stuff. Could go into this quite a bit, and I'm not going to. But be careful. Be careful of teachers. I'm treading very thin right now. Be careful of teachers, of ministries, of doctrines that are wanting to take you back. One of those we read last week. I taught on this last week, that there is only one law for the foreigner and the citizen. And if whoever you're listening to whatever book you have, if there is anything in there that says that, well, if you're a former Gentile, you don't have to do these things, but if you're Jewish, you do, I would quit reading it right then. Because what is that doing? That's taking us back to a system. That's taking us back to a wall of division. That's rebuilding the wall that Yeshua said he brought down. What was the result? Well, the ground would open, fire would fall, Korah, his family, his possessions, everything would go into the ground. The fire would fall, and 250 of men of reputation would, be burnt in the fire. But the tragedy is that in chapter 17, verse 6, but the very next day, the whole community of the people of Israel complained against Moshe and Aaron. You have killed Adonai's people. Really? So I guess that they're figuring that if Moshe could split the sea, then Moshe was the one that split the ground. If Moshe could build a tabernacle and fire could come from the heavens, I guess that he was the one that brought the fire from the heavens and killed these people. No, they're the ones that killed themselves. And it's called rebellion. I often think, I teach a lot on the kingdom. And probably not anybody that still is listening, but I've been asked from time to time, why do you teach so much on the kingdom? I don't even understand the question. I don't understand the question. Because once you have a sight of the kingdom, it never leaves you. I understand those words of the book of Hebrews that Abraham, he looked for a city whose builder and maker was Yah. I understand those words. I cannot keep myself from teaching on the kingdom. I cannot keep myself from teaching about Israel. It is literally impossible for me to not teach on these things. So here we have these people that are now blaming Yah or blaming Moshe for something that's not Moshe's fault. The next day, the whole community said, you killed Adonai's people. What is the issue here? I guess I look back at the words I started this year again with of Corinthians that says these things are written as prefigurative historical events. Basically, so you and I will not make the same mistake again. Why? The mistake they made is they didn't have their eyes on where they were going. So if you and I believe that we're going somewhere and we have our eyes on the kingdom, I'm going to throw this out. This is not doctrine. This is not theology. This is not something that I'm going to say I even think I'm right on, but just a concept. Is it possible that the millennium, that 1,000-year reign, that I still believe there's going to be a 1,000-year reign? Isaiah chapter 2, the Messiah will be seated upon a throne. The Torah will go forth from Jerusalem, the word from Mount Zion. I still believe all those things, and I live for that. But who's to say that a person that has no longing for that kingdom is going to be in the kingdom? Now, I'm not talking about being saved or redeemed or any of those things, but if you made no effort on this side of the kingdom for the kingdom, why should you have the benefit of just kind of walking in the kingdom? It's like, hey guys, thanks for all you did, and I'm here and I'm going to enjoy the blood, sweat, and tears that you shed for this to be available. I've been at funerals from time to time, and somebody's standing there and telling how this person's in heaven and all of these things, and I'm like, why would the Almighty have allowed them into His heaven? Whatever that theology is, I'm not getting into that, but why would He allow them into His presence if they cared nothing about His presence on this earth? Okay, they never had a thought, and when confronted with that thought, they were like, "No, I don't want to have anything to do with that God stuff." But then all of a sudden, God's just gonna drag them into the kingdom, kicking and screaming. That doesn't make sense to me. So, I mean, could it be that what is talked about in Revelation of those outside the kingdom that are weeping and gnashing of teeth? Is it possible to be saved, quote unquote, saved, but miss out on that 1,000 years and be really sorry because of I could have if I'd have just longed for it, but because I wanted to make exile great again? You miss out on that 1,000 years. I don't know. So with those people, Moshe and Aaron do something, again, much more gracious than I. Here this plague is starting in the midst of the people. People are going to die. In fact, in the end, 14,700 people would die. But the plague was going to affect everybody. All of those who had rebelled against going into the land were going to die on the spot. It doesn't say that, but that's what I'm kind of thinking. Joshua, Caleb, Moshe, a handful of others, they're going to go in. All the rest, let's go ahead and kill them out now. Why waste the number of years we have still in the wilderness? And Moshe says, Aaron, go get a coal and run. Run to the altar and get a coal and stand between the living and dead. Well, first of all, Aaron's like over 100 years old right now. So he's saying, Aaron, run. That kind of probably looked a little funny. But Aaron runs over there to the best of his ability. He grabs a coal from the altar. He sees his target, the living and the dead. And he makes a path, runs toward this center with a coal in the fire pan, not knowing if what he's doing is going to work. He has no clue. It may be that the Almighty does not, doesn't look upon that, and all of a sudden Aaron's just caught up in the plague. But Aaron takes a chance of running into the middle of the crowd, standing between the living and the dead, and pleading for mercy for those who are still alive. And it says the plague stopped. He stood between the dead and the living, and the plague stopped. I'll challenge you something this week. Find your coal and find your place to take a stand with it. And what that may mean to you, what that may mean to me, I really don't know. I don't have any notes on this. I don't have any illustrations on this. But we are in the place right now in our society, in our world, that you can see the plague, a plague called sin, that is just sweeping over the land. The debauchery, the levels of sin that you and I, most of us, never even wanted to dream about or think about, are now norm in our society. But you and I have the ability to take a coal from that altar and to stand. That may be just looking at one person and telling them about redemption. That may be just looking at someone and telling them what has happened in your life. Don't be afraid to tell someone what has happened in your life. You never know if your testimony, how insignificant you may think it seems, how insignificant you may believe it is. It is not. And it may be you telling somebody about a decision you made in your life may be the difference between life and death in theirs. Now, down to chapter 18, I'll finish with this. This goes into, this is one of those chapters I really don't like because it is far too easy for it to seem self-serving. But in verse 1, Adonai said to Aaron, "You and your sons and your father's family line will be responsible for anything that goes wrong in the sanctuary." Wow, what wonderful words of encouragement those are. Now remember, Aaron has already lost 2 sons with the unauthorized fire. And now, Yah says, if anything goes wrong in there, we're having a talk about it. Really? I think at that point, he probably spent a few moments thinking about back to the first meeting he had with Moshe. It's like, I think you ought to do this alone. And now here he is responsible for everything that's going on in, it says, the sanctuary. Well, if you and I are as Shaul, Paul would say, we are the temple of the living Elohim, which could be translated the tabernacle of the living Elohim, which could be translated as the sanctuary of the living Elohim. What is this telling us? Take responsibility. What happens in our lives, it's like meeting the person at the gas station. Okay, you can't help from meeting them, but you can take responsibility for not allowing them to come to your house and and affect your family. I'll leave it very clean right there. We need to take responsibility for what happens, for our response to it. Take charge. As I said to the youth last week and a half ago now, regarding, this was step number 2 in this message I did. Establish your boundaries, which the scripture tells us that's part of being scripturally minded or biblically minded, is that the boundaries of the scripture become our boundaries. But we need to not only establish those, we need to guard them, we need to protect those boundaries and take responsibility when we allow something into those boundaries that should not be there. And there's the idea we'll talk about later in the life of Pinchas or Phineas. The rest of the chapter is the one that I don't really like because it talks about giving. And of course, this is given to the Levites. They are not given a portion in the land. They're not given an inheritance in the land because Yah is their inheritance. How all that comes out and means in the end, and how we take that into our day, I'm not really sure. But for the Levites, it was the responsibility of Israel to support the work. Okay, well, I want to give to the tabernacle, but not to the Levites. Well, the tabernacle is just a meaningless tent without the work of the Levites that the Levites are putting into it. So Israel as a whole was to be a prosperous nation, so they could out of their prosperity could support those that were doing that work. Now, the controversy today is this: are those that are in ministry, are they Levites? Well, I'm not, the farthest as I know, I have no Levitical blood flowing through me, but do I do the job of a Levite? I think so. Do many of my fellow teachers out there, ministry leaders? Yes. And so this thing of giving, of being a part. See, I've said this so many times. I'm going to try to again, not sound self-serving, but I had a friend of mine that right after the Dallas Israel conference was canceled, they were stuck in the United States. They landed in Dallas almost the same time that everything began to happen. They landed almost exactly at the same time that they were having to cancel the summit, which then led to Israel attacking Iran, which has led to all this other stuff. So they spent 2 weeks now in the United States with really nothing. So we helped. Yeah, we helped in some of the expenses. I couldn't have done that on my own. It was because of some of you who feel that you want to give into this concept of the kingdom that we're actively involved in today. We're working toward the kingdom as we see the kingdom coming and the establishment of it. So for those that are still stuck in the controversy of is giving a biblical thing, should we do it now? Should it just be corn? Whatever. I just challenge you that you're missing out. You're missing out on the blessing of being involved in what is happening in our day. See, we can either be a bystander or we can be on the field. We can be involved in what is happening to bring this about. The scripture calls it the hastening of his kingdom. Now, I totally believe that something Brad taught many years ago was that he and others, he declared the end out of the beginning. I believe everything is established and is moving forward. But is there in that establishment of it, is there an aspect in which the time can be speeded up? It is alluded to that in various, in Revelation and other places. Is there a built into this a way to speed up, to hasten the kingdom coming? And is it that hastening, is that our involvement? The more we become involved, the quicker it will come. I can't give you that as a definite, but something just tells me that the more that I long for, the quicker it's going to come. And so maybe if we had more people that were doing more longing to go forward instead of going backward, and that longing then produced the actions of working, of giving, of being involved, I'm willing to take a chance at that, because I look around me now and there's a lot of times that I just think to myself, this world is not really worth living in at the moment. And that saddens me to say that, because of young people that are out there, they're trying to do their best. And I support them in everything they're doing. But I don't think that in the end, if my longing for the kingdom, if our longing for the kingdom hastens the day of his kingdom coming, I'm kind of thinking they're not going to be mad at us in the end. So join in. All right? Don't go back. Don't go back. Don't let anybody lead you back. Go forward. It's worth it. It is worth it. Shabbat Shalom. Shavua Tov. Have a blessed, prosperous week. Bezrat Hashem, God willing. See you again next week. Until then, be strong.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.